I picked the cloudiest day of ever to make a video. Hello, hi, my name is Mad. Welcome to Mad Music. This video has nothing to do with music whatsoever, so today I am going to talk through all the books that I read in 2021 because I set a goal of reading 30 books and I far exceeded that and read 53. And I'm very proud of hitting that goal, and you know, I'm not trying to brag or anything. If your goal was to read 20 books and you read 15, or if your goal was to read one book and you didn't even do that, like, I don't care, you know, it doesn't matter to me. Whatever your goal was, if you tried it, at least gave it a shot, then good job. And I'm proud of myself for reading 53 books, which is probably the most I've read in a year, so I want to rant about them. I have this nice little setup that my big head is blocking. Here are all my books. These are not all of them. Some of them were library books, so you know, I wasn't going to go back to the library and rent them out again just to make this video. So here we are. Coffee, like always. I have a candle because you can't be a reader if you don't like candles, right? Having too much fun in the swivelly chair. Okay, this is a Christmas decoration, but it's cute and I'm keeping it here. Since we're talking about books, we know what that means. I gotta get my smart person glasses out. Oh, that's nice. We're gonna get this nice big glare. I just gotta tilt my head this way the entire video. Let's see if I can do that, okay? I have tracked all my reading on both Goodreads and Storygraph. I just started using Storygraph like a few days ago, so I transferred all my data there because Storygraph gives you like these really cool statistics on your reading habits. So like if the books are slow-paced or fast-paced, or if you read more nonfiction versus fiction. You can follow me on either Goodreads or Storygraph. I think both usernames are Mad Eye Moody. One has underscores. I don't know. Feel free to follow me there. You don't have to, but like, I don't have any friends there yet, so I need friends. Because I'm old-fashioned, the other way that I keep track of the books that I read is keeping it in this handy-dandy notebook. Oh, this is what I get for making a setup. Now I gotta move everything. Alright, starting off the year of 2021, the first book I read was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. At the end of December of 2020, for some reason I was just like, you know, I'm just gonna read all the Harry Potter books again. It's been like 3 years since I've read the first one, so why not read the entire series? This honestly is probably one of my favorites. Well, I don't know. I love all the books and I can't choose. This is probably my favorite book to movie adaptation. 1 and 2 are also good adaptations, but like, I don't know, 3 has something extra. It's probably Sirius and Lupin. Lupin's my guy, okay? Lupin's my guy. Kind of the downside of rereading the Harry Potter series though is that Storygraph tracks your most read author. So my most read author of this year is J.K. Rowling, which I'm not gonna lie, it feels a little gross. It feels a little gross. I think we're all kind of in that purgatory where, you know, we love Harry Potter and we love Harry Potter. Prisoner of Azkaban, I want to say it's one of my favorites, but really they're all my favorite and I can't choose, so. Okay, that's still on fire. The second book I read of 2020 is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Wow, I didn't see that coming. Now, this one, honestly, is probably my least favorite movie adaptation. But the thing is, I really love the book and I really love the movie, but almost as like separate things. I don't think the movie is a very true adaptation to the book, but also, I mean, look at the book. You can't really like make a true adaptation to an over 700-page book, to be fair. Something that I find kind of funny, and that was kind of jarring when I was reading it. You know how in the movie, some of the first few scenes are them going to the Quidditch game? That doesn't really last that long. It's like a couple scenes, right? It takes up like the first 100 pages of the book. I don't really know why the Quidditch tournament takes up that much room, but here we are. So yes, I love this book. Again, we can forget the author, but Harry Potter. The next book I read of 2021 was The Sun is Also a Star. This year really was just full of rereads for me. I have read this book before. I have not seen the movie though, which is kind of ironic given this is the movie cover, but we'll ignore that for a second. I don't normally gravitate towards stuff like this, like YA romance, unless I want like a very easy read. This book is fun. I think there's a lot of like good moments in it. It's not my ultimate favorite. It's not something I would go back to repetitively, but like I am glad that I read it for a second time because I remember not really liking it the first time, and I definitely liked it a little bit more reading it the second time. So who knows? Maybe I just need to give all these YA romance books second and third tries. I don't know. Now at this point, you know, I had taken a day break from Harry Potter, so I decided to go back to it. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Now, actually, if I have to pick a favorite, it would be this one. It would be this one. Yeah, I'll admit that. It would be this one. It's kind of the same Goblet of Fire thing for me, where I really like the book and I really like the movie, but kind of as two different things. The Voldemort versus Dumbledore battle is the coolest thing out of this movie, at least to me. Like, woo! Woo! So good. It's great. It's great. It's wonderful. I love it. Nice, thick book. Thick book. Also, the colors of this, like just going for the bold, like singular blue, like just having it all blue. It's eye-catching. I just, this one. We're taking a big shift here, but the next book I read was called Long Time Coming by Michael Eric Dyson. So this book is written in a series of letters towards different victims of police brutality. So each chapter has a different theme to it, different problems that America has with race, and just different aspects of like how we could do better, really. Each theme is focused on a different person and addressed to a different person. So there's one chapter that is addressed to Emmett Till, there's another one that's addressed to Eric Gardner, another one that's addressed to Breonna Taylor, and really it's just a good book. The language of it is easy to read, so it's an easy read, but it's not an easy read. You know, it's a very heavy subject line, but ultimately, like, I'm glad I read this. I have also read Tears We Cannot Stop by Michael Eric Dyson, and that one as well is very good. That one is written almost like a sermon, so it's split up as a sermon if you're into that kind of stuff. Each chapter is, I don't know, the different parts of a sermon. I'm not religious, I don't know, but it's very clever the way that it's written, in the same way that this is very clever. Again, both books are very heavy. They deal with obviously very tragic subject lines, but it's a good read and I would absolutely recommend it. Also, speaking of heavy reads, the next book that I read was Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This is probably my favorite book on the planet. Even if you absolutely hate this book, I don't think anyone can deny that you've been affected by it, you know? Like, I could go on for literal days about this book and why I like it, but I think one of the main reasons is just the fact that Steinbeck really doesn't offer like any answers to anything that he proposes in this book. And I feel like that's maybe why people get annoyed with this, is because they see the ending as like an answer, but I don't see it that way. I don't think Steinbeck is, I don't know. I shouldn't put words into his mouth because obviously he can't respond. But the way that I see it, he doesn't offer an answer. He doesn't tell you that what George has done is good. He doesn't tell you what is right and what is wrong, but he lets the characters, you know, sit with their decisions and lets the audience like think about like, what did I just read? Alright, the next book I read in 2021 is Half-Blood Prince. Yeah, this one. This is where it's at. So I always hold a special place in my heart for Prisoner of Azkaban, but if I'm gonna be realistic with myself, I think my two favorite books of all of Harry Potter are Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince. Like, I love these two storylines so much. I really do love like the idea of Horcruxes and investigating Voldemort, and it's creepy and it's weird and it's frustrating that, you know, they can't get to the bottom of it. We have seen from the other books that Voldemort is like the biggest, scariest wizard out there, but other than like, you know, killing a bunch of people, we don't actually know really what he's done or what he's capable of, and just knowing how hard he's going to be to destroy. I really, really like that plotline. And of course, the twist at the end, spoilers, I'm sure you know about Harry Potter. I just love the twist at the end of thinking the Half-Blood Prince is gonna be Voldemort, but no, it's Snape! Oh boy! I love that. I love that. I love that. That is, ooh, that's the best. That's the best. Now, honestly, at this point, I was like putting off reading Deathly Hallows because I didn't want to get to the end. So the next thing I read was this little book called The Color of Water by James McBride. This is a memoir about a black man like grappling with race and his family and the fact that his mother's white and he's never really like known his dad that much, and growing up in a super big family and nobody really like talks about race. Like all his brothers and sisters are black, he's black, his mother's white. He has like half siblings who have a black father, but he's never known his own father. And it's very emotional, you know, because we're talking about race in America. That's automatically going to be very heavy and emotional. It's a cool read and you should read it. Okay, my next read was, for the second time, A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. Burgess? I never know how to say his last name and I always feel like I'm saying it wrong, but I'm probably not. I don't know. I love Clockwork Orange. This is by far one of my favorite books ever written. I just think it's so clever how he made, you know, his own slang language to put in this. He mixed like English and Russian words to make his own slang. As much as Alex, the lead character, feels disoriented in the world that he's living in, he feels different, he doesn't feel like he belongs in it. The reader feels disoriented and like they don't belong reading the story because, you know, they can't understand half of the words that he's saying. I think that is so clever. It is so I do have to say though, because I guess this whole year is about rereading and watching movie adaptations of these books, I hate this movie. I hate this movie so much. I absolutely hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I don't like it. And because I love the book so much, that's why I hate the movie. Alright, next book I read was Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. This was such an easy read. I don't remember most of the story because I read this quite a bit ago, but I do remember it being funny and very like ironic humor. Like I said, an easy read, so I should just read it again. I think that's what that means. My next read was Animal Farm by George Orwell. This as well is a reread because this whole year was full of rereads for me, I guess. It's one of those, again, like Of Mice and Men, that I would recommend to anybody because I think that it's an important book, but it's not a very fun read. I don't know if anybody really like enjoys reading Animal Farm, but I think it's a good story. Things can easily go sour, and the people who promised to not turn into the oppressors end up turning into the oppressors once they are given power. All right, the next book I read was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Yeah. I think I got to like the second page and I was already emotional because this truly felt like I was reading Harry Potter for the first time again. Because the only other time I've read this was when I was 13. So it's been quite a while since I've even picked this up. I did not want to lose that feeling of reading it for the first time again. I love this book. I think it's great, but it's never gonna be my favorite because it's the end. I love movies 7 and 8, but they're never gonna be my favorite because they're the end. I love this book, but also, why do we say goodbye to so many characters? And honestly, the one that I just can't forgive is Mad Eye Moody. Like, we barely see any of him. Also, Fred, really, you're gonna do all of us like that? Like, I don't think anyone is over Fred's death, and you're correct, you're right. We should all bully J.K. Rowling over that. We have plenty to bully her over, but also, like, Fred's death, like, that's wrong. That's wrong. All right, next book is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And no, not the screenplay. This is the one that is supposed to be written by Newt Scamander. So, like, the dictionary, the little, like, encyclopedia of all the little magical creatures. It's a cool book. It's a cool idea. That aside, we can all start making fun of J.K. Rowling again. It's not the most exciting read, but it's clever. Going back to dystopias. Lord of the Flies. I was very satisfied with this. It was a little slow in the beginning, and I wasn't quite sure, you know, where it was going because I'm kind of an idiot and I had no idea what the storyline was of Lord of the Flies. I did not even know what the, you know, insinuation was. I did not even know that Lord of the Flies was a title, other than the title of a book. I did not know it meant anything else. Poor Piggy. Poor Piggy. You know, poor all the boys, really, but like, poor Piggy. He tried his best, and nobody listened, and everybody just gave him crap, and don't do that to my boy Piggy, okay? I get that he's a little annoying, but like, you probably would have been fine if you just listened to Piggy. I'm not gonna lie, you probably would have been fine. If you like creepy dystopia type stuff, I would recommend it. It's good. You've probably read this for like school or something, so you're probably sick of it. I didn't have to read it for school, so I'm not. The next book I read, this is Matched. Reading it the second time, I can definitely see where she took inspiration from like 1984, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451. I really like the first book. I think the second two is where it tapers off for me. I do like seeing the perspective of, you know, a woman who is so trustful of the society that she's in that she doesn't question anything, and we read it and we're like, well, this is kind of scary, look how in control they are of your life, and she's like, no, it's for the best, like look, I'm taken care of. And big shocker, the next book that I read in 2021 was Crust. Wow, nobody saw that coming. Now, unfortunately, and I really say unfortunately because I actually do really like Matched. I think it's maybe not the most original storyline, but it's intriguing. And as you read Matched, you really want to see what happens in the next one. It's still good, but it's really slow in certain places. And overall, like, I did not like this one nearly as much as Matched, which unfortunately is like probably not where you want to be on a second book in a trilogy. Matched was so good to me. And this one I just don't have the same feelings for. I am absolutely just full of surprises because you'll never guess the next book that I read. So yes, the finale of the Matched series, this is reached. I do have to say, I do really like the covers. I do like the simplicity of it. You know, I like the symbolism of she's completely trapped in her little ball in the first one, and then she's, you know, breaking out in the second one. In this one, she's fully free. She's gonna step out of it. But once again, I don't quite like the storyline as much. It almost gets like too complicated for me. I don't like the idea of the plague. Part of it is a little too real. Also, a large part just feels messy to me. I feel like there's too many twists in this one for the sake of twists. Like I said, I just feel like Matched is so well done, and the next two just like taper off. And this is just too much for me. But I still do like the series. All of that considered, like, I do enjoy reading these. I did enjoy reading these for a second time. I don't know. It's not my favorite, but it's still fun. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, what is reading but for fun? We've gotten to the point of the video I don't want to get to. We're here and we have to talk about it. Oh god. The thing I read after the Matched series was this little son of a gun, except it's not little. This took forever to read, partly because it's huge, and also because like the writing is so tiny, to be honest. I don't understand how you write this much for a story we already know. One, you have this weird glossy cover, and I don't know why I hate these black glossy covers. I just don't like it. I don't like it. Get it away. My most frustrating emotion with Twilight is that it could have been good, right? It could have been good. A story about a human falling in love with a vampire and those complications and the conflict between vampires and werewolves and the fact that you have a whole society of vampires within the human world. All of that is interesting, but like, it's not done well. It's not done well. Edward's perspective of Bella almost makes Bella more interesting. Like, she's a more lovable character than seeing her perspective in the Twilight series. And that's kind of a weird contradiction because this makes Edward look gross. Like, we all know Edward is gross, but this makes him just look terrible. But it makes Bella look better. And honestly, like, I think having a series about vampires or about humans falling in love with the vampires would be way more interesting from the perspective of a vampire. So I feel like this should have been like the first addition to the Twilight series. But then no one would like Edward because this is just gross. I don't know. This was bad. And I don't like it. So the next thing I read was The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's obviously a story that we probably all know. We are all familiar with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I will be honest, when I started reading this, I thought Dr. Jekyll was the bad guy. I always assumed he was the bad guy because he just has a weird name. I did not know Mr. Hyde was the bad part of this man. Needless to say, I was surprised. Overall, I really liked this. It's a very short read, it's a very quick read, and it's just a classic. Like, obviously I think you can argue that this is incredibly didactic and predictable in a way, but I still like it. It was fun, and I enjoyed it. And it was a breath of fresh air after reading Midnight Sun. Now, this one is one of my favorite new reads of this year. This is The Outsiders. This was just delightful, and like, at the same time, not delightful. I seem to like books that are pain, but pain in the Of Mice and Men way and not pain in the Midnight Sun way. This whole video is now just gonna be me bashing Midnight Sun. The writing in this is so simplistic and easy to read, and I just love how confessional it feels and how intimate it feels. It just truly feels like that Ponyboy is talking directly to you and he is relaying his story only to you, and I just love how private and personal it feels, and again how like confessional it feels. It just ooh, I love it, I love it, I love it. And I need to watch the movie, which I have not done. Fahrenheit 451 or 451, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I don't know how people pronounce it, but I do overall like the message of how even if you have everything taken away from you, other people are gonna want that same thing that was taken away from you, and through each other you can remember anything or you can hold on to anything. I think that's a cool theme. It's one of those books that I think is obviously very influential and is very important for inspiring, you know, a whole generation of new books. It's not necessarily my favorite thing in the world. It was not my favorite read, but I am glad that I have read it because, like I said, I think it's influential of a lot of the books that I like. Taking a very big turn in theme, the next book I read was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. At this point, I will admit the painful truth that I had never read anything other than Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and I called myself an Austen fan. As much as I love this book and Pride and Prejudice, this is essentially the same storyline, but with different characters, which I've heard is almost every novel by Jane Austen. But whatever, we still love Queen Austen, we love her regardless. Like, so what if she has a genre and style that she sticks to? Like, we're all gonna eat it up anyway, so who cares? Austen is just the perfect author to where you really just need like a good heartfelt story. Like, you don't want anything too sad. You want to be driven on an emotional roller coaster, but you don't want to be crushed at the end. Like, you want a happy ending. Like, Austen is your girl. Moving on, the next book I read was Secret Garden. This was touching, this was heartfelt, it was good. I kind of feel silly because I don't have a whole lot to say about this. I'm glad I read it. Not my favorite, but like, it was still a good experience. If there's anything that can top my love for The Outsiders, this one would far surpass it. Catcher in the Rye. I love every minute of this. Just compliments to the chef. I love this so much. As you know, I love the like reflective, just confessional, really intimate, just first person narrative of I love this. I love it so much. Moving on, the next book I read was this pretty little thing, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Oh boy. Don't get me wrong, I do like this. I think it's a good book. However, it's not my favorite. And I think I've just been a little disillusioned by the fact that I have heard everybody, and I mean everybody who has ever read this book, like put it up to be like the best book ever written, the ultimate 11 out of 10 of all books that ever exist. I have just heard time and time again people say that this is the best thing in the world. And I read it and I just didn't feel the same, and so I feel like hearing those expectations just made me like it less. I do think that this is a good book. I enjoyed reading it. I like seeing the character dynamics between Dorian and is it Henry? Lord Henry? Yeah. Right? Who is it? Lord Byron? Who is talking? Yeah, Lord Henry. Lord Byron is a poet. Lord Henry. Oh my god. Oscar Wilde is a phenomenal writer in the way that he's able to show two different perspectives and like write them well and fully realized, if that makes sense. Again, while I do think that this was a good book and I am very glad to have read it, I don't agree that it's the greatest thing ever written. But like, if you think it's the greatest thing ever written, I'm happy for you. I just don't feel the same. But I still do like it. It's just not like, oh my god to me. You know what I mean? Oh boy! The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I took so long to get through this book because this book is so dry and so dense and so tedious and monotonous, and you might hear all of that and think that I absolutely hated it, but I didn't. I actually like this book a lot. The reason I love this so much is because having that writing be so dry and monotonous just perfectly reflects the story. The writing is so tedious and hard to get through, and that's kind of the point because you're seeing the same pattern over and over again in the storyline. You know, the characters have hope, then it gets squashed, and they're on this incredibly long journey, and you just feel like they are never going to get there in the same way that you feel like you are never going to finish this book. And while people might hate that, I actually think that that's what makes this book so memorable and clever. And this is where I get people to instantly turn away and give me a dislike, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore because YouTube doesn't do that. The next book I read was a novelization of The Force Awakens. And if you don't like The Force Awakens, I understand, but I actually happen to do like Force Awakens. I actually think it's really enjoyable. So I wanted to read the book. And to be honest, I feel like this book kind of takes all the enjoyable parts out of the movie. I don't feel like it's a very good novelization. I feel like the only reason I enjoyed part of it is because I do enjoy the movie. In theme to that, the next book that I read was the novelization of The Last Jedi. And if you hadn't already disliked this video, this is where you definitely dislike it, because I not just love, I adore The Last Jedi. I love The Last Jedi so much. So much. It's fine if you hate it. I understand if you hate it, but my God, I love that movie so much. I love everything about The Last Jedi. I love the pacing of it. I think that it's perfect, and what more perfect way than to read it in a book form. I adore this. I love the movie. Everything in the movie is in the book, and then some. Like, you really get a lot more characterization into Finn and Rose in particular, I feel like. And once again, if you hate Rose, you're not gonna like this book, but I don't mind Rose, and I just, ooh, I love this book. I love this movie. That's all I got. Moving on and staying in theme, the next book that I read was the novelization of Rise of Skywalker. There's a theme going on, yes, I'm predictable, I know. I have a love-hate relationship with Rise of Skywalker because I love The Last Jedi so much. If you haven't disliked this video, this is where you definitely dislike it, because I still do find Rise of Skywalker ultimately enjoyable, but I don't quite respect how it takes a lot of aspects of The Last Jedi and it tries to redact all the things that people hated about that movie. If you're gonna make a decision, stick with it. Anyway. It's not my favorite movie for that reason. It's not my favorite book, but I read it. Next book I read was Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. I think one of my favorite complaints I've ever heard about this book is that people are like, this is not historically accurate. Yeah, we know it's not historically accurate. It's historical fiction for a reason. People are funny. I did not expect to get so wrapped up into this book as I did, but like, I was invested. Like, this was a good read. I have not watched the movie yet, but I didn't know Obi-Wan made an appearance. And Obi-Wan plays like the best character in here. So I really do need to watch the movie. Overall, like, I like this way more than I thought I would. Okay, next book I read was Pride and Prejudice. Absolutely in my top 3 of Mice and Men, Clockwork Orange, Pride and Prejudice. Blah, blah, blah. Those have got to be my top 3. Nothing is better. Nothing is better. This is the height of romance. God, if you don't... Do you like Pride and Prejudice, or are you a lame son of a gun? I am joking, but honestly, I love it. Remember when I said that I normally don't like thrillers? I read Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and I watched the movie. Listen. The ending is so unsatisfying. I hate it. Like, and my dislike of thrillers just comes from the fact that, like, I just don't understand the messaging. Are there themes to it? Is there a grand message? I feel like I always want there to be a grand message, and there's just not. I guess that's just the point of a thriller, is you're just there for the ride. I don't know. What's the message? Elizabeth never gets to fall in love? Help. I don't know. Probably right behind Catcher in the Rye. This has probably got to be like my favorite discovery of 2021, of books that I've never read before. Margaret Atwood's writing is like everything I want to be in a writer someday. Like, every single line just feels like poetry. I don't know. I just... a dystopia with like really good writing. There's so much to love with this. There's so much to love. This book. That's it. This one. Moving on, the next book I read was called How to Make Friends with the Dark. I don't know why I keep giving YA novels a chance when every time I read a YA novel, I'm like, I didn't really like that. But constantly, I'm just giving them more and more chances, and it's not my cup of tea. I don't really like this. I think there are a lot of messages in this book that are important and could be really impactful for people, and I don't hate it to the point to be like, this should have never been written. Like, there are themes and messages in this that could be really important to people, and I ultimately think it's a good book for that reason, but it wasn't fun, and that's about all I have to say. The Pearl by John Steinbeck, and this is a very easy read. It's only about like 80 pages, I think. If you don't like Steinbeck, you are not gonna like this book. It's not my favorite read of his, but I liked it. It's very didactic. You understand the messaging, but like, I liked it. Ooh, okay. Next book I read was House of Gucci because I was so excited for this movie. Like, I was suckered into the hype of, you know, Adam Driver, Lady Gaga, Jared Leto, Al Pacino, whoever else was in this movie, Salma Hayek. Like, there are so many people in this movie. I get it that it's a marketing ploy and they got all these actors because they knew people wanted to watch the movie simply for the actors. And I know it's a marketing ploy, but I still fell for it. Yes, I did, and I still love the movie. Anyway, the book was good. I did heavily skim some parts because it's about stocks and shareholders and the company, and like, I care, but not that much to learn about how many millions they lost. We all care about Patrizia and Maurizio, like, that's really what we care about. The next book I have that I'm ashamed to admit is New Moon by Stephenie Meyer. This is not my favorite. This is not it. This is, no. No. I read this and that's all I gotta say. I read it. The next book I read was V for Vendetta. This was great. I have never read a graphic novel before, but I enjoyed every single second of it. The movie's good too, but I think there's so much that the movie can't do that the graphic novel can do, and I just... 5 stars, A+. Oh! Next book I read is Eclipse. And I think that's all I'm gonna say. Where did I put my glasses? Maybe I'm kind of cheating, okay? Because these were not for fun reads. These are technically textbooks, okay? But I'm gonna count them as books that I read this year because it's my channel and I get to do whatever I want. Fun, just light little stuff, you know? This is Poetic Designs. It's all about meter and poetry. This is Poetic Meter, obviously about meter and poetry. This was for a philosophy of science class I had to take that I really didn't like, so this is Science and Religion. Are they compatible? The answer is no. And then this is also a philosophy of science. The reason they say no, by the way, is just based on like organized religion. It's not necessarily that all religions are incompatible with science, but like the mainstream organized ones, so like Christianity. Or at least mainstream Christianity is what they're talking about. Again, just lighthearted, light reading, you know? The next book I read that I also don't want to admit that I read is The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner. If this was our first introduction into the vampire world of Stephenie Meyer, then this would have been interesting because we wouldn't have known that, you know, the vampires can't get hurt in the sun, that they don't have to breathe underwater, yada yada yada. Like, all of that would have been interesting, but it's not as much because we know all the secrets. Like, it would have been way more thrilling if we were able to walk into the world of vampires with Bree at the same time as her. The next book I read was called The Strange Library, and this is like a weird, gory Alice in Wonderland, to be honest. A very easy read. It's very disturbing, it's weird, but it's cool. Elevation by Stephen King. It's a cool story, but it's just so unsatisfying to me. Why does it end the way that it ends? Like, why? Give me something more. I'm just unsatisfied. Unsatisfied is what I would say. The Little Prince, which yes is a kid's book, but I have heard so many good things about this. It's ultimately very charming. It's very cute. Nobody told me it was gonna be so sad at the end though. I want to cry now. Speaking of crying, the next thing I read was Boy in the Striped Pajamas. You know, people criticize like, well, this could have never really happened. Like, you know, he's a 10-year-old boy, but he acts more like a 6-year-old. How can he not know this stuff? It's a fictional story. It doesn't have to be completely realistic. Like, forget that it's unrealistic. Forget that maybe a 10-year-old would have been smarter and would have understood the circumstances. Forget all of that for a second and just look at the messaging behind it and like, what if this is how things happened, you know? And just, it's just pure. You know what I mean? Like, it's a devastating storyline, but that's why it's devastating, is that it's pure. Next thing I read was In Our Time by Ernest Hemingway, and let me just say, I never feel smart enough to understand Hemingway. This is a collection of short stories. There's obviously a lot going on that I feel goes right over my head. There are several stories in here where there's dialogue between two characters, and you know, you can kind of just like get the impression that the words that they're saying goes deeper, like they're almost talking about two different subjects at the same time, and you can understand the surface level subject, but I'm just not insightful enough to understand the deeper meaning. And I kind of just feel that way throughout this entire book. Hemingway is a confusing gentleman. The next thing I read was The Stranger, which is very on theme within our time because I once again don't feel smart enough to understand everything that's happening in this book. There's very clearly a lot of philosophy going on and I don't get it. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I was very surprised to learn that this was Fitzgerald. I, for the longest time, did not know it was him. I don't know, I just don't really mind that there's not seemingly a grand message in this story. It's just more about entertaining the thought of like, what would this be like if this happened? And I kind of like that view. But then at the same time, isn't that just what Elevation is by Stephen King? And yet I didn't like that? I don't know. Finally, the 53rd book that I read this year was Fallen by Lauren Kate. And I know I said I normally don't like young adult novels, but this one actually was okay. I actually enjoyed this one. Spoilers if you have not read it. It is about fallen angels, and obviously we don't have all the answers yet because this is a 4-part series. We don't know yet what role the lead character plays, but I'm intrigued to find out, and I'm honestly kind of excited to read the rest of the series. Maybe I just don't like standalone YA. I don't know. Maybe I need series more. After all that, that is everything that I read in 2021. If you also like any of these books that are here, please let me know. What are your thoughts on any of this stuff? What are your recommendations of things that I should read this year? What are your favorite books? What are your favorite reads of 2021? Do you have reading goals? Do you hate books? Tell me anything, I don't care. And with that, that is all I have for you today. Stay noteworthy, you little bookworms. Do you see what I did there? It's a notebook! Bye! You like that? You got it? Ooh! My one positive with this book, though, is that they constantly drink coffee, and it just makes me want to drink coffee. But what's the message? You mean to tell me you were going to put 2 teenage girls in a tent by themselves at like a sporting event that has a ton of wizards that you've never met, you don't know what they're capable of, you have no idea who they are, these teenage girls have not finished all their Hogwarts trainings, like, yeah, they're capable, but they're really not full wizards yet. Like, why do they have to stay at a different tent just because they're girls? Like, just let them be with the boy. I just don't. There's things like that in this that are just like, why? What's the point? Like, this doesn't make any sense. This is actually really stupid. If there is a scene in all of Harry Potter that is the absolute coolest thing ever, it is the graveyard scene in Goblet of Fire where Voldemort comes back to life, and you know he has like his transformation and everything, and that is the best scene of all Harry Potter ever, and I love it. And you want to know what's not as cool? What's in the book? In the book, the whole scene is just Voldemort like, hey Harry, I know you're really confused. I know you don't know how I'm back, so I'm just gonna tell you like everything. And it takes like too many pages for Voldemort to like fully explain everything, and it just feels like unrealistic for Voldemort to just sit there and like explain everything. And this is just me being nitpicky because I love that scene so much in the movie. Does this really matter? Of course not. Am I still going to mention it? I guess so. I am. So yeah. Gosh dang it, that scene in the movie is the greatest. It is, and nothing will compare to it.